So continuing on the path of things that can cause underperformance in horses that are not necessarily unsoundness, Missy Hayes asked us a great question where she wanted to talk about backs, back soreness, poor saddle fit, and how that can cause issues in a racehorse. So it's something that's typically not talked about in racehorses. We typically only talk about knees down in terms of soundness, and then typically when we see underperformance, we try and chalk it up to something else. But something that I always felt strongly about, which I still feel strongly about, is back soreness in horses. So if you think of a horse, and this is how I look at a horse, the shoulders and hips are basically your wheels, your back is the chassis. Okay, so if you're thinking of a performance race car, if your chassis is not good, you're gonna have a big problem in transfer of power from your hind end to your front end. And with any athlete, and it goes into any realm, you need a strong core. If you don't have a strong core, the athlete, or in this case the horse, is working as two separate units. When you're running, when you're doing anything in sports, you want your body to function as one fully strong unit. So to me, back soreness is a big thing that needs to be paid attention to in racing. I'm going to let Dominique talk a little bit about some of the things that she might have seen when we're talking about back soreness and things that pop up.
I mean, the saddles can be inappropriately fit, improper padding, exercise riders doing a poor job. But I also have noticed going to the sales, a lot of times I'll see great shoulder, great hip, and then the back is too long or the back is weaker. It's just at an odd angle. And so if you purchase a horse or breed a horse with a poorly conformed back, I mean, no matter what you do, it's never going to be perfect. You're going to lose power because of that. Oftentimes we see these horses move and it looks like they're two different horses. The front end is moving different than the back end, and they're losing power behind because of their back. And so because they're losing power behind, they're then trying to either pull with their front legs, and it really just jars everything up. So to me, it first comes with selecting a horse with a very strong back and not having those initial issues.
Yes. So as she pointed out, and you know, it was lovely for me to get horses in all shapes and sizes, and understanding that backs are a problem. I then had to come up with different equipment to help those horses. So when you get horses with long backs, it's very easy for them to get really sore in their back because there's only so much you can do to help them condition. A big piece that we would use to try and help them would be acupuncture and chiropractics, coupled with a type of equipment called draw reins, which basically is a rein that attaches to the girth. So it attaches to the girth here, comes up through the bridle, and then the rider holds it. As you pull on that, it pulls the horse's head forward, and it kind of flexes that spine a little bit to where as they gallop and train, it strengthens their back. In the United States, obviously, we're training on flat surfaces, so we have to use different ways to strengthen a horse's back. And one thing that is paramount is teaching a horse to collect themselves while they jog and while they gallop. When they collect themselves, they utilize and start using their core, and they start using their back. And as they train, that can then be strengthened. If you leave them on a loose rein, if you don't collect them, if you let their head go straight up in the air, all of a sudden you're not utilizing their back to train, and their back will start having soreness issues because of it.
So the goal with the draw reins, when used properly, and again, not everybody knows how to use them, and they can actually make things worse, but if they do a good job and they do teach the horse to bow their neck properly, they can then utilize their back and hind ends more, and you can see a lot more muscle development over the back and hind ends. But not everybody needs draw reins in order to do that. As long as you have a good exercise rider who, like Mike said, keeps them collected, keeps their head down, puts their hands down, that's fine. But what I do tend to see is right now the fashion, I guess, of exercise riders. Well, it's fashionable.
Oh yeah, it's fashionable.
They look pretty in the saddle when everybody wants to ride like a jockey. You know, that's fine for breezing, but in a routine gallop, you need to lengthen your stirrups and not just be gripping the horse with the ankles, because it changes your weight over the horse and where your hands are. And so, you know, riding them a little bit longer allows your position to be able to hold them in a proper neck set and neck carriage so that they can use themselves properly.
So there's a common saying in horse racing: the longer you ride, the longer you will ride. Meaning, the longer your irons are, the more likely you're going to stay on the horse. So I used to hate it. I still hate it when riders come in and jack up their irons to try and look pretty like a jockey. You cannot teach a horse to collect themselves at a gallop if your irons are too short, because everything in racehorses, what people don't always understand, is give and take and leverage. Nobody can hold 1,200, 1,300 pound animals and force them to do what you want them to do. You have to coax them into doing what you'd like them to do, but you have to use leverage in order to do that. If you're too high out of the saddle, the angle of your reins is such to where you cannot get that horse to drop its head to where you collect it. You have to drop your irons far enough. If you're too long, then you're in trouble as well. There's a fine balance to where your irons can be, to where you can give the horse enough rein to where it'll drop its neck to where and bow its neck to where you can collect that horse back and put it in a collected gallop. When you ride short, what tends to happen is the horse is not fully collected. Their neck's just bent like this versus dropped and relaxed and in the bridle. And then what happens is they can't get their hind legs underneath them enough. Okay. And this is where back issues start. And then it goes down as a chain from back to stifles to hocks. Because if they cannot collect themselves properly, what then happens is, well, now all of a sudden they can't get their hind legs underneath them far enough. So their stride behind is shortened. They can't grab the dirt. They can't push through properly. So then their stifles start getting sore because they're overusing their stifles because they can't flex their back properly to engage their hind leg. Then once the stifles become sore, they then overcompensate and start using their hocks to try and push off more. It turns into a chain effect. So saddle fit, sore backs is a big thing. It's not necessarily looked at enough in horse racing. As you can sometimes see in the morning, everybody uses the same types of pads. Everybody uses the same types of saddles. I've had horses with higher withers where I'd add a little bit different padding underneath to try and help the horses out in training. But yes, we don't focus on saddle fit enough, and we really, in modern day, and I've worked with some phenomenal riders who I know you follow me on social media. I appreciate working around people like you because I learned so much. A lot of modern day riders want to look pretty. They don't want to do the job as what could be best for the horse in terms of riding longer. So it's kind of old school versus new school, but there's reasons why old school really worked and really helped horses. So back problems are a big issue, and it's something that can dramatically cause a shift in performance by 5 to 6 lengths. So these are things that I always look for when I was claiming horses, training horses, or doing anything with them. So Missy Hayes, thank you very much for the question. And yes.
Yeah, I think the topic just shows like a solid exercise rider, they're worth their weight in gold. And the best trainers, in my opinion, usually have the best exercise riders because they're willing to pay them more, and they give them the best horses. And I think like they can tell that like all these top Derby contenders, these top stakes horses, they have phenomenal riders on board, keeping them going every day.
And that's huge. And that's the thing is, we don't always, and, thumbs up to the real players of the backstretch and all the great videos they do. You cannot be a good trainer if you do not have great help. And the rider is paramount in that process. The groom and hot walker and everybody else, assistance foreman, everybody involved, because the equipment has to be properly maintained. It's got to be properly fitted to the horses. You constantly have to be checking to making sure everything's perfect every day to give those horses the best shot possible. And yes, as Dominique said, it's not just that all these top trainers are getting the top horses. They also have the top staff, which helps them get the most out of their horses. So I couldn't pay good exercise riders enough. A lot of them almost bankrupted me because I did pay them more than everybody else so I could actually have them in the barn, which pissed off some other trainers when I'd offer their riders more to come work for me. But look, you have to have the best staff if you really want to be at the top in this game, because it's make or break with a lot of these horses. So love the question, and we'll dig into more stuff like this as we continue onwards.